Welcome, dear listener. Tonight's calming sleep story takes you back to the early days of America, when settlers built their homes deep within forests, far from the busy world. Imagine a wooden cabin, standing firm against the winds of wilderness, where nights were long, quiet, and filled with the scent of pine and smoke. Today, we explore how early American settlers slept in these wooden cabins, how they kept warm during harsh winters, how families huddled together near the fire, and how the silence of the forest lulled them into peaceful dreams. Before we begin, I kindly invite you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your location in the comments so we can see where in the world you are listening from. Now, let us drift gently into the story. The forest lay heavy in silence as dusk gave way to the deeper shades of night, and a wooden cabin stood quietly among the towering pines, its walls built from rough logs cut by the hands of weary settlers who had carved out their place in the wilderness, far from the comforts of towns they once knew. Within the cabin, life moved with a rhythm both harsh and gentle, dictated by the rising sun, the falling darkness, and the constant need to survive. Inside, the glow of the hearth was the heart of the home, flames flickering softly, sending warmth into corners that still held the chill of the autumn air. A wooden bed frame creaked under the weight of straw-stuffed mattresses, layered with woolen blankets and animal pelts, offering comfort after a day of endless toil. Sleep did not come easily in this world, for the night outside was alive with sounds. The cry of wolves in the distance, the hoot of owls echoing through the trees, the whisper of the wind against the logs. Families gathered close, often sharing a single room where children lay side by side, their breaths forming a quiet chorus, while parents kept watch a little longer, tending the fire and making sure no spark threatened the safety of their fragile shelter. The beds were rough, but served their purpose. Simple frames filled with straw or dried grass, sometimes replaced when vermin or dampness spoiled them. Pillows, when they had them, were often sacks stuffed with feathers, though more often than not, a rolled-up cloak or folded garment had to suffice. The settlers lived by necessity, not luxury, and the way they slept reflected the life they endured. Nights were long and cold, especially in winter, and keeping warm meant layering blankets, pressing close together, or lying near the hearth where the warmth lingered. Yet even so, the fire had to be guarded, for a dying flame could mean a freezing night, and too much flame could set the cabin ablaze. Thus, sleep was often broken, with someone rising to place another log on the fire. The creak of the floorboards, a gentle reminder of vigilance in the dark. In those early years, people often followed the old custom of segmented sleep, drifting into a first rest soon after darkness fell, then waking in the middle hours of the night to tend the fire, pray, or simply sit in quiet thought before returning to bed for a second sleep until dawn approached. This rhythm suited the silence of the wilderness, where the world outside remained unbroken by lamps or streets, where the stars themselves seemed brighter, pressing close to the earth through the open sky. Yet, even with hardships, there was a certain peace in these cabins, a closeness of family that modern houses often forget. The rough wood walls held in more than smoke and warmth. They held the steady breathing of loved ones, the whispered prayers before sleep, the dreams of better harvests, safer winters, and children who might one day see a gentler life. The forest might be vast and wild, but inside the cabin there was shelter, and within that shelter, the rhythm of sleep, fragile yet enduring, carried them through another night. leading them slowly toward the promise of another day to come. The promise of another day unfolded slowly, as the first pale light crept through cracks in the wooden walls, turning the darkness into a softer gray. The cabin stirred with the faint rustle of blankets, the shifting of bodies still heavy with sleep, and the faint sigh of a child waking before the others. The fire in the hearth had dimmed to glowing embers, and one of the parents, already half awake, rose quietly to place a new log upon it, coaxing the warmth back to life. Morning did not arrive in sudden brightness. Instead, it revealed itself gently as the forest outside remained hushed, save for the early song of a bird breaking the silence. Inside, the air still carried the damp chill of night, and the blankets clung close, holding the memory of shared warmth. Settlers often lingered in this fragile hour, neither fully asleep nor truly awake, savoring the comfort before the demands of the day called them away from their beds. The wooden mattresses of straw, though uneven and sometimes prickling through the fabric, offered a kind of rest that was more valuable than comfort itself. For sleep was the true luxury in a world of constant labor. Children, with flushed cheeks and tangled hair, often burrowed deeper under the hides, unwilling to rise, while parents exchanged soft words, their voices low so as not to disturb the little ones. This gentle transition from sleep to waking was as much a part of their lives as the long hours of toil that would follow. In those cabins, sleep was always touched by the wilderness. Nights left their mark in the form of frost on the windows, or the faint smell of smoke in the air, or the lingering ache in muscles that had rested upon rough straw. Yet, there was a rhythm to it that carried the settlers forward. They understood the importance of gathering rest, for without it, their bodies could not endure the long hours of cutting wood, tending animals, or clearing fields. Sometimes, neighbors who lived nearby would describe their own nights when they gathered together, sharing stories before sleep. On colder evenings, it was not unusual for more than one family to huddle within the same cabin, spreading blankets on the floor beside the fire, sleeping in rows like travelers at an inn. Such closeness created bonds stronger than walls, for in the wilderness, survival depended not only on the strength of one's arms, but on the warmth of human company. The transition between first and second sleep was still part of their nightly rhythm. Those who woke in the middle of the night might use the quiet to whisper prayers, to stitch clothing by the dim glow of the fire, or to reflect on dreams. Even as dawn approached, that rhythm lingered, reminding them that sleep was not only for the body, but also for the spirit. And so, as the morning grew brighter and the forest outside filled with the stirrings of life, the settlers rose slowly, carrying with them the memory of the night's fragile rest and preparing themselves for the tasks that the day would demand. Tasks that began even before the last traces of sleep had faded away. The first tasks of the morning came quietly, as though they were an extension of the night itself. The settlers moving slowly at first, rubbing the last heaviness of sleep from their eyes, while the air still held the chill of dawn. The fire in the hearth was now alive again, crackling with new logs, its warmth pushing back against the creeping cold. A pot of water was set over the flames, steam rising gently as the day began in earnest. Yet, even as hands reached for tools and feet moved toward the chores outside, the sense of night lingered, for sleep had only just released its hold. Cabins were small, with little space for privacy, so waking was often a shared experience. Children stirred when their parents did, blinking at the gray light slipping through wooden shutters, yawning and stretching beneath blankets that smelled faintly of smoke and wool. Their hair was tangled from the restless night, their cheeks still flushed from the warmth of sleep. parents encouraged them gently, coaxing them from the comfort of the bedding, though often the little ones lingered longer, reluctant to leave the cozy nest of straw and hides. Beds were quickly straightened, blankets folded and placed near the wall, for the room that served as a place of sleep at night now had to serve as living space through the day. The fire, once a guardian through the long hours of darkness, became the center of morning activity, heating food, warming water, and drying damp clothes. And as they worked, the settlers spoke in low voices, conversations often revolving around how they had slept, whether the night had been too cold, whether the straw in the mattress had shifted uncomfortably, or whether the fire had burned too low. Sleep was always a subject of importance, for rest meant strength, and strength was the only wealth a settler truly possessed. A poor night's sleep could make the following day's labor unbearable. They knew this well, and so each evening and each morning carried the echoes of their nights, the shared experience of surviving another round of darkness together. Families might recall the sound of wolves, or the restless cries of infants, or the way the walls had creaked as the wind pressed against them. In this way, the memories of night traveled with them into the light of morning. The rhythm of rest and waking formed a cycle, unbroken and enduring, carrying them through each season. In summer, mornings came earlier, with sunlight piercing the cracks of the cabin walls long before the family was ready to rise, while in winter, dawn was slower, the cold sharper, making blankets harder to leave behind. Yet, whether summer or winter, spring or autumn, the settlers rose from their rough beds with determination, carrying the strength gathered from their fragile hours of rest. And so the day unfolded, with footsteps leaving the warmth of the cabin to meet the chill outside, where chores demanded attention before the sun climbed higher. But even as they turned to the fields, to the animals, and to the endless work that awaited, the memory of the night lingered, shaping their thoughts. Sleep was never left behind fully. It followed them like a shadow, reminding them that when the sun fell again and the forest returned to silence, they would seek once more the fragile peace of their straw-filled beds, gathering rest to carry them forward into another day that would rise just the same. The cycle promised to repeat itself, and as the day stretched onward, the settlers carried with them the thought of evening's return, when once again the fragile peace of their straw-filled beds would gather them in. The hours between dawn and dusk were filled with unending toil, yet the memory of rest lingered, guiding them toward the comfort that awaited. By mid-morning, the cabin stood empty of all but the faint crackle of the fire, for most hands were in the fields or deep in the woods, or tending to livestock that roamed near the clearing. Still, the rhythm of sleep shaped even the day's labor. Men paused at times to straighten weary backs, recalling the warmth of blankets left behind, while women thought of the little ones who had risen reluctantly from their bedding, still half lost in dreams. Sleep was never truly forgotten, for it was both the reward of labor and the promise that sustained it. As the sun climbed higher, shadows shortened, and the heat of work grew heavy, but the settlers pressed on. They knew that only by enduring these hours could they earn the rest that awaited them at night. And when exhaustion came, when the weight of fatigue pressed against their limbs, the thought of lying again upon straw and hide gave them strength to continue. By afternoon, the cabin once more stirred with life. Children returned first, running in from their chores, voices bright against the silence of the woods. Their laughter echoed within the rough-hewn walls, filling the room that only hours before had been the still chamber of sleep. Mothers followed, setting pots to boil, mending torn garments, arranging bedding that would soon be used again. fathers came last, often as dusk drew near, bringing with them the scent of earth and wood, their shoulders bent with labor, their eyes heavy with the need for rest. Even before the sun had fully set, the cabin grew dim, its single window allowing only the fading glow of twilight. Shadows crept along the beams, and the forest outside softened into silence, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the distant call of night birds. This was the hour when families began to prepare for sleep once more, gathering blankets, stoking the fire, and whispering prayers of gratitude for the shelter that surrounded them. Nightfall was not sudden, but it wrapped itself slowly around the cabin, drawing them inward, toward warmth, toward closeness, toward the familiar ritual of rest. Children curled beside each other once again, their small hands clutching the edges of hides, their breathing soft and steady. Parents watched over them, lingering a little longer near the fire, knowing that the night ahead would be long and that they must guard against both cold and flame. And so, as darkness deepened, the settlers found themselves returning to the same fragile rhythm, surrendering once more to the silence of the wilderness, to the soft pull of dreams, to the wooden beds that promised only enough comfort to carry them into another dawn that would surely come, as it always had, and as it always would. The night stretched long beyond the first embrace of dreams, and within the wooden cabin the quiet deepened, broken only by the faint pop of the fire and the soft breaths of those who lay huddled beneath their blankets. Outside, the wilderness whispered its own song, the rustle of branches swayed by unseen winds, the distant cry of an owl, and, at times, the sharper sound of creatures moving through the underbrush. Yet the cabin held steady, its log walls guarding those within, its hearth glowing faintly like a heart beating against the dark. For settlers, the night was not always one unbroken slumber. Many followed the ancient custom of segmented sleep, drifting into a first rest soon after dusk, only to awaken in the deep hours when the fire had burned low and silence pressed close upon the cabin walls. In that interval, parents often rose, placing another log upon the hearth, their movements quiet so as not to wake the children. They might whisper prayers by the firelight, reflect upon the labors of the day, or prepare small tasks that could be done while the world lay still. It was in these hours, between first and second sleep, that thoughts often turned inward. The settlers, weary but wakeful, found a strange calm in the stillness. Sometimes they shared hushed words, conversations too soft to be spoken in the noise of day. At other times, they simply sat near the glow of embers, watching the flicker of flame cast dancing shadows along the rough wood beams, listening to the steady breathing of their family. It was a pause, a moment between labors, a space carved out by the night itself. Children, if they stirred, might climb closer to their parents, seeking warmth and comfort against the chill. A hand would smooth tangled hair. A blanket would be tucked more firmly around small shoulders, and soon the little ones would drift back into dreams. Such tender moments were woven into the rhythm of segmented sleep, binding families together in ways that daylight could never fully reveal. As the second half of the night approached, the cabin grew quiet once more. Those who had kept the fire alive stretched themselves back upon their straw mattresses, pulling hides close, allowing their bodies to sink again into slumber. Outside, the stars wheeled slowly across the sky, unseen yet ever present, their light spilling faintly through cracks in the shutters. The wilderness, too, seemed to settle, its earlier voices fading into a deeper hush. In this way, the settlers returned to rest, surrendering once again to the fragile peace of their makeshift beds. Sleep came softer now, less burdened by the day's labor, carrying them gently toward the promise of dawn. And though the night was not yet finished, though hours of darkness still lay ahead, they trusted in the rhythm that guided them, a rhythm as old as the land itself, one that would lead them from dreams back into waking, when the first pale light of morning crept once more through the cracks of their wooden walls. The first rays of morning spilled gently through the cracks in the cabin walls, casting thin lines of light across the straw-filled beds and illuminating the small, familiar objects scattered about the room. The smell of smoke lingered, mingled with the earthy scent of damp wood, a reminder of the night that had passed and the warmth the hearth had provided. Outside, the forest awoke slowly, birds calling in soft choruses, leaves trembling in the earliest breeze, and the faint rustle of animals beginning their day. Inside, the settlers stirred, bodies heavy from the fragmented sleep, but strengthened by the fire's warmth and the shared comfort of the family huddled together through the night. Children blinked against the light, rubbing their eyes, while parents quietly prepared for the morning, stoking the hearth to life again and setting pots of water to boil. Every movement carried the memory of the previous night's rest. The first sleep, the wakeful pause, the second sleep, woven seamlessly into the rhythm of daily life. Tasks awaited immediately. The men fetched tools for chopping wood, repaired fences, and tended to livestock that had stirred early in the clearing. The women gathered water, prepared simple meals, and mended clothing that had frayed in the work of yesterday. Yet, all these activities were tempered by the quiet reflection left over from the night. Settlers understood that a hurried start could disrupt the fragile balance of energy, and so even in labor there was a measured pace, a gentle acknowledgement of rest before effort. Children played quietly near the edges of the cabin, their laughter subdued by the awareness that work was to follow. Yet, even in play, traces of sleep lingered. The slow stretching of limbs, the half-closed eyes, the drowsy smiles of little ones still carrying dreams from the night. The rhythm of segmented sleep, practiced over years, had become a natural companion, and even at this early hour it guided movement, gestures, and speech. Breakfast was modest but shared with care. Porridge or dried bread warmed by the fire, water drawn from a nearby stream, the occasional splash of milk from the cows that had been milked with careful hands, all consumed amidst soft conversation, often reflecting on the night's dreams, the plans for the day, or observations about the weather. The settlers' lives depended upon the cooperation of each member, and meals marked the gentle transition from the quiet, inward world of sleep to the outward demands of survival. As the morning light strengthened, the forest became alive with sound and movement. The cabin's walls no longer contained only silence. They now held voices, laughter, and the steady rhythm of work. Yet, in every gesture, every step, there remained the echo of night, the subtle presence of rest that lingered even as the settlers labored. For in this life, built upon the careful balance between exhaustion and renewal, the memory of sleep carried them forward, offering strength, patience, and the quiet comfort that another night, another cycle of rest, would always follow. The day wore on steadily, the sun climbing higher and then slowly dipping toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the clearing and signaling the approach of evening. The settlers labored without pause, though each task was tempered by careful attention to strength and endurance. Men chopped wood, repaired fences, and tended to the livestock, their sweat glinting in the late afternoon sun. Women carried buckets of water from the stream, prepared simple meals and repaired clothing, while children ran errands or gathered small kindling from the forest edges. Yet, even amidst this constant motion, there lingered the memory of night's rest, the rhythm of segmented sleep embedded deep within their bodies. As the sun began to wane, the light softened, and the cabin itself seemed to sigh in anticipation. The warmth of the day had faded from the wooden walls, replaced by a cooler, more contemplative air. Families returned gradually, bringing with them the smells of the forest, the dust of labor, and the slight ache of muscles tested through hours of effort. The cabin's hearth, once dimmed during the morning chores, was reignited, flames crackling gently, sending warmth and light to chase the creeping shadows from each corner. Children, now fully aware of the coming night, gathered near the hearth, their small hands busy with quiet games or helping with simple preparations. Mothers arranged blankets, shook out straw mattresses, and ensured that hides were in place to guard against the evening chill. Fathers stoked the fire and inspected the cabin's structure, listening for any unusual sounds from the surrounding forest, the wind moving through the pines, or the distant calls of nocturnal creatures beginning their nightly patrol. The settlers' awareness of danger, both real and imagined, remained sharp. But within the walls of the cabin, there was also comfort, the certainty of family and routine. As darkness deepened, the rhythm of evening mirrored that of the night before. First sleep would soon take hold, yet there remained a delicate interlude, a moment when the mind lingered on the events of the day, when prayers were whispered, when soft songs or gentle stories passed quietly from one generation to the next. Children would yawn and stretch, curling close to parents or siblings, their eyes heavy, while the adults ensured that the fire burned steadily, maintaining the fragile balance between warmth and safety. Outside, the forest transformed as daylight faded, shadows deepened among the trees, and the sounds of wildlife shifted. Owls hooted in the distance, small creatures rustled in the underbrush, and the wind whispered a softer, more secretive song through the branches. Within the cabin, however, the rhythm remained steady. Segmented sleep would come as it had before, dividing the night into portions of rest, wakefulness, and quiet reflection. A rhythm as old as the land itself, and as essential as the work that filled the daylight hours. Thus, as evening settled fully, and the settlers prepared to surrender once more to the pull of sleep, the cabin became a sanctuary of warmth, light, and gentle sounds. The same fragile peace that had carried them through countless nights before. And as the first stages of rest began to claim each member of the family, they understood that tomorrow would come, bringing both toil and comfort, labor and rest, repeating the enduring cycle that was life among the wooden cabins of the early settlers. As darkness deepened beyond the final glow of twilight, the cabin settled into a quieter rhythm, the kind that only the wilderness could provide. The sounds of the forest outside grew sharper in their silence. The rustle of leaves, the occasional snap of a twig under the careful steps of nocturnal animals, and the distant hoot of an owl surveying the night. Within the cabin, the fire burned low but steady, casting long shadows across the rough wood walls, shadows that seemed to dance with a life of their own as the night deepened. The settlers, weary from the long day, began to prepare for the first sleep, arranging blankets and animal hides on the straw-stuffed beds, tucking children in gently while whispering soft instructions to keep them warm. Some adults lingered by the hearth, stoking embers, listening to the faint crackle that reassured them that warmth would not fail, that the night would not overwhelm the small wooden sanctuary they had built with their own hands. Even in these moments, the rhythm of segmented sleep was respected. A pause in the middle of the night would come as it always had. A quiet interval for reflection, prayer, or tending the hearth before returning to the comfort of rest. The first sleep took hold gradually, bodies sinking into straw and hides, the gentle sway of blankets offering the semblance of softness that the wilderness denied. Children's breathing evened out. The earlier excitement of dusk replaced by calm. The gentle pull of dreams leading them into quiet imaginings of animals, fields, and the warmth of family. Parents remained attentive, listening for the slightest sound, moving with care when necessary, ensuring that no ember from the hearth fell or that no creature breached the fragile barrier of logs and walls. In the interval between first and second sleep, the cabin became a place of whispered activity. Some adults rose, stretching muscles stiff from the day's labor, tending the fire to ensure it did not die, or quietly preparing food for the next morning. Others sat in the dim light, speaking softly of plans, of worries, or of hopes for harvests, livestock, and the safety of children. The stillness of the night amplified these moments, the hushed tones blending seamlessly with the natural sounds of the forest, creating a quiet symphony that was unique to life in the wilderness. The rhythm of segmented sleep, though foreign to modern ears, was as natural as breathing. It allowed settlers to divide their rest, to rise when the night seemed longest, and to return to sleep with ease, recharged for the day ahead. It carried with it a profound understanding of time and space, of vulnerability and care, of the delicate balance between the comfort of the cabin and the dangers of the forest beyond. As the night stretched on, shadows deepened and the fire glowed softly. The settlers surrendered once more to the quiet pull of second sleep. The cabin, a humble wooden refuge in the vastness of the wilderness, held them securely, offering warmth, protection, and the gentle promise of morning to come. And as their breathing slowed, the rhythm of life within the walls continued uninterrupted. The enduring pattern of toil and rest, night and day, carrying them forward in the timeless cycle of early American settlement. As the first pale hints of dawn crept through the cracks of the cabin walls, the forest outside began to stir with quiet life. Birds called softly to one another. The wind shifted in gentle currents through the pines, and distant rustling marked the movement of animals venturing from their night shelters. Inside, the cabin seemed suspended between two worlds, the lingering calm of night and the burgeoning energy of a new day. Those who had slept in segments during the previous night now stretched, slowly rising from the straw-filled beds, their muscles aching slightly from hours of rest interrupted and resumed. Parents moved carefully, mindful of the children still drifting in dreams. Soft hands smoothed blankets, tucked small bodies closer for warmth, and whispered gentle instructions for rising. The fire, dim from the long hours of night, was coaxed back to life, the crackle of flames adding both warmth and sound to the quiet morning. Water was brought to boil, the scent of smoke and steam mingling in the cool air. Even the smallest gestures, rearranging hides, shaking out blankets, brushing straw from bedding, carried the comfort and familiarity of routine, a rhythm that had been established over years of living in these wooden cabins. The day's work began gradually, as settlers remembered that the body required a careful transition from rest to labor. Men gathered tools, repaired fences, and prepared animals for the day, while women tended to domestic tasks, mending garments, fetching water, and preparing simple meals. Children joined in small chores or collected kindling for the fire. their small hands learning the balance between responsibility and play. Yet the memory of night's rest remained with them, a gentle presence guiding every movement, softening the edges of fatigue before the full weight of labor took hold. Meals were prepared in the half-light, simple yet nourishing. Porridge, bread warmed by the hearth, milk from the morning milking, and occasionally a handful of berries gathered from nearby bushes provided sustenance. Families ate together, speaking softly of the night that had passed, of dreams remembered, or of small observations about the forest. Even conversation moved slowly, measured by the awareness that their energy was finite, and that each task required careful attention to the strength they had gained from sleep. By mid-morning, the cabin emptied once more. Those able moved into the fields, to the edge of the forest, or to tend the animals that required constant care. The rhythm of labor and rest had been instilled deeply, a pattern shaped by necessity, tradition, and the ever-present wilderness surrounding them. At every step, settlers carried with them the echoes of segmented sleep, the gentle reminders of night, and the knowledge that the cycle would continue again in hours to come. As the sun climbed higher, shadows shortened, and warmth filled the small rooms. The settlers understood that each day was both a continuation of the last and a preparation for the next. The forest, the cabin, and the rhythm of labor and rest all intertwined to create a life both demanding and secure. And as the morning moved toward afternoon, each person remained aware of the delicate balance between toil and rest, between work and the promise of night, knowing that the peace of their wooden beds would again beckon, just as it always had, carrying them forward in the unbroken cycle of settlement, survival, and family. As the afternoon faded and the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, the settlers returned to the cabin with weary but steady steps. The long hours of labor had left their mark. Muscles tight, hands calloused, and clothing dusted with the pale residue of soil, straw, or ash from the fields and hearth. Yet within the cabin there was a sense of completion, of satisfaction earned through work performed and tasks accomplished. The forest outside softened into muted greens and browns under the waning sunlight, and the air grew cooler, carrying hints of evening dew. The hearth was rekindled, flames dancing across logs that had been carefully set aside. Smoke curled upward, filling the cabin with its familiar scent of warmth and safety. Children ran in from the edges of the clearing, their cheeks flushed with play and work, voices softening as they sensed the approach of night. Mothers directed them toward simple chores, carrying water, tidying bedding, or assisting with supper preparation. Fathers checked the tools and animals one last time, ensuring that all was secure before the calm of evening fully descended. Simple meals were shared, eaten beside the fire that now became the central point of light and warmth. Bread, porridge, and occasionally a bit of preserved meat or cheese were consumed, along with stories murmured quietly, reflecting on the day's events. The children listened with rapt attention, their eyes occasionally flicking to the glowing flames, imagining the adventures that might inhabit the shadows. Even as conversation flowed softly, there was a rhythm underlying the household, a pacing that prepared all for the night ahead. With the sun fully set, the forest beyond the cabin walls grew darker, and its sounds shifted. The rustle of nocturnal creatures, the faint call of distant birds, and the whisper of wind through trees became more pronounced. Within, the settlers began to dim activity, securing blankets and hides, making certain the fire's warmth would last through the early hours of the night. The first stages of sleep approached, and bodies began to relax into straw-stuffed beds, stretching tired muscles, adjusting hides for comfort, and curling together for warmth. The subtle familiarity of night, the smell of smoke and wood, and the shared presence of family all worked together to invite rest. Yet, as always, segmented sleep awaited. Parents might rise briefly, checking the hearth, whispering prayers, or reflecting upon the day's labors before returning to rest. Children, often lulled into dreams, might stir, seeking warmth or reassurance before slipping again into sleep. The cabin, though small, held all the rhythms of life. Labor, care, laughter, and rest, intertwined in a delicate balance that had been practiced for countless nights. As darkness deepened, the settlers surrendered once more to the gentle pull of sleep. The cabin walls, worn smooth by time and weather, held them safe, and the warmth of shared bodies and fire carried them into the first stages of rest. Outside, the wilderness hummed quietly, the forest settling into its nightly rhythm. Within, the rhythm of life continued, steady, enduring, and guided by the unbroken cycle of dawn and dusk. Labor and rest, work and sleep that defined the existence of early American settlers in their wooden cabins. Night had fully claimed the cabin and the surrounding forest, and within the small wooden walls, the settlers had mostly surrendered to sleep's steady pull. Yet, in the hours that followed the first sleep, a familiar rhythm returned. Parents quietly rose to stoke the fire, ensuring that the embers glowed steadily through the chill of the night. Hushed whispers filled the room as small tasks were performed, checking on children, adjusting blankets, or quietly mending garments that had frayed during the day's work. The cabin, though still, was alive with careful, deliberate motion that respected the fragility of sleep. Children slept deeply, their breathing even, yet every few hours some would stir, reaching for a parent or sibling to find warmth or reassurance before drifting back into dreams. The settlers understood this pattern intimately, for it had been practiced over many seasons. A first sleep to release the body from day's fatigue, a period of wakefulness in the quiet hours of night, and a second sleep to renew strength before the day would begin anew. This segmented sleep was a gift of time, allowing reflection, preparation, and care within the safe walls of the cabin. The fire's soft crackle echoed gently across the room, casting long shadows that shifted as logs settled and embers glowed faintly. The smell of smoke, mixed with the earthy scent of the forest, carried in through the cracks, a constant reminder of the wilderness just beyond the cabin walls. Every movement was measured, careful not to disturb the fragile rest of others. Settlers rose and sat, stretched tired muscles, or performed tasks that could only be done in the stillness of night. Fetching water for early morning, sharpening tools, or quietly observing the wind's movement through trees to predict the coming day's weather. Segmentation of sleep created moments of reflection, when thoughts of the day's labor and the challenges of survival were considered without urgency. Parents might whisper prayers or recount small memories, seeking guidance and hope for the days ahead. The quietest sounds, the soft rustle of straw, the gentle exhale of a child, the faint crackle of the hearth, blended into a rhythm that was both calming and restorative. The settlers knew that the night was a partner in their survival, offering both pause and protection, even as the wilderness pressed close beyond the cabin walls. As the second sleep approached, the cabin grew even quieter, the night outside deep and unbroken. Families returned to their beds, arranging blankets, smoothing straw, and curling together for warmth. The gentle pull of sleep once more claimed them, yet its depth was tempered by the knowledge that the wilderness was never far, that vigilance was always required, and that the rhythm of segmented sleep offered both safety and renewal. Within these wooden walls, under the soft glow of a dying fire, the settlers rested, carrying within them the enduring patterns of life, labor, and sleep that had sustained generations through countless nights and countless dawns. And so, as the forest whispered outside and embers glowed faintly within, the cabin became a sanctuary once more, its walls embracing those within, guiding them gently into the second phase of rest that would prepare them for the morning, for the unbroken cycle of work and repose that defined life among the early settlers. A rhythm as natural and enduring as the wind moving through the trees beyond the wooden shelter. The first light of dawn slowly filtered through the small gaps between the wooden planks, casting pale streaks across the cabin floor and illuminating the faint traces of the previous night's fire. The forest beyond was beginning to awaken. Birds called in soft, tentative voices. A gentle wind rustled the leaves, and the distant sound of running water whispered from the stream nearby. Inside the cabin, the settlers began to stir, bodies gradually waking from the second sleep, muscles stiff from hours of rest, yet strengthened by the pattern of segmented slumber that had long guided their nights. Parents rose first, quietly shaking off sleep's lingering heaviness, their hands reaching for the fire to coax it into warmth. The smell of smoke, mixed with the earthy scent of wood and straw, filled the room, a comforting reminder of the night that had passed. Children, still blinking sleep from their eyes, were coaxed gently from the comfort of blankets and hides, stretching and yawning before gathering around small morning chores. Even the smallest actions, the brushing of hair, the adjustment of bedding, the careful placement of pots on the hearth, carried echoes of the night's rest, a rhythm seamlessly flowing into the work of the new day. Meals were prepared with care, simple yet nourishing, often consisting of porridge, bread warmed by the fire, and milk drawn from the morning's milking. Families ate together quietly, speaking softly of dreams remembered or observations from the night. The pattern of segmented sleep was evident in their movements. Eyes were still heavy, limbs not fully alert, yet there was a sense of calm efficiency born of routine and familiarity. Every gesture carried the memory of the night, allowing them to conserve energy for the labor that awaited in the fields, at the animals, and throughout the surrounding woods. By mid-morning, the cabin emptied as the settlers moved outward. Tools were gathered, fences repaired, and livestock tended with careful attention. Women carried water, prepared simple meals to be eaten later, and mended clothing, while children ran small errands or gathered kindling, learning responsibility alongside the rhythm of daily life. The echoes of night's rest continued to guide them, subtly influencing pacing and strength, reminding each person that energy was finite and must be carefully managed to endure the day. Outside, sunlight grew stronger, casting sharper shadows and warming the clearing around the cabin. The forest, too, responded. Animals became more active, birdsong increased, and the air shimmered with the heat of early day. Yet within the wooden walls, the echoes of night remained. Soft conversations, quiet laughter, and gentle attentions to one another maintained the intimate rhythm that had carried the settlers through countless dawns. This balance between labor and rest, between the lingering comfort of sleep and the demands of work, shaped every action and thought, creating a life both simple and enduring, anchored by the wooden cabins that sheltered them from the vast wilderness beyond. By late morning, the cabin stood empty once more, alive only with the faint crackle of the hearth and the occasional creak of wooden boards settling under the day's heat. Settlers moved through the surrounding fields and forest with steady, deliberate energy. Each step measured and purposeful. Men checked fences, sharpened tools, and guided livestock, while women carried water, tended small gardens, and prepared ingredients for meals to come. Children ran errands, gathered firewood, or helped with chores that matched their size and skill, their movements careful yet filled with youthful curiosity. Even amid the busyness, there remained a subtle echo of morning's wakefulness and night's segmented sleep. Eyes still carried a gentle heaviness. Limbs moved with a calm efficiency, and each breath seemed to carry the memory of the night's rest. Tasks were performed deliberately, not hurriedly, for the settlers understood that the rhythm of energy dictated success. Labor without pause could lead to fatigue, mistakes, and diminished endurance. This awareness guided every gesture, from bending to lift a heavy bundle of hay to the careful stirring of porridge over a flame. Small moments of rest punctuated the day. Brief pauses where hands were folded, shoulders stretched, or eyes closed for a heartbeat before returning to the work at hand. The cabin's interior remained quiet in memory, even when empty, as if the walls themselves carried the influence of earlier hours. The warmth of night's fire, the comfort of shared blankets, and the presence of family sleeping near one another. These recollections strengthened resolve, reminding each settler of both the rewards of labor and the comfort of returning home to hearth and shelter. By midday, the sun shone high overhead, casting bright light across fields, forest edges, and the clearing surrounding the cabin. Shadows were short, heat rising from the earth, and every movement seemed to carry a faint sheen of perspiration. Yet, despite the physical demands, settlers maintained a rhythm that balanced work and observation. They checked on livestock, ensuring no animal had strayed, inspected fences for damage, and maintained tools, sharpening edges and oiling wooden handles. Every action was purposeful, contributing to the preservation of life, shelter, and the fragile stability achieved through constant effort. Children, too, had moments of instruction embedded within their activities. They learned which herbs were safe to gather, how to balance small loads of kindling, and the proper care of animals. Play intertwined with instruction, allowing them to grow accustomed to both responsibility and the demands of survival. Even brief periods of rest were integrated seamlessly, teaching patience, awareness, and the importance of rhythm in daily life. As midday moved toward afternoon, the settlers began to sense the day's progress. Tasks nearing completion, meals planned, and the horizon slowly hinting at the waning sun created an awareness that the rhythm of labor was soon to shift toward evening. Bodies weary yet strengthened by steady work, the settlers carried forward with quiet determination, guided by the enduring balance between toil and rest, and by the intimate knowledge that the cabin's walls awaited them with warmth, hearth, and the promise of comfort at day's end. Returned gradually to the cabin, carrying with them the final traces of the day's labor. The light shifted, softening into muted golds and reds as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows that stretched across the clearing. The forest beyond seemed to deepen in color, trees standing tall and dark against the sky, the rustle of leaves sounding more pronounced as evening creatures began their quiet stirrings. Within the cabin, a sense of calm descended, signaling a transition from the day's busyness to the reflective rhythm of dusk. The hearth was reignited, flames crackling gently as logs were carefully arranged to sustain warmth throughout the coming night. Children gathered near the fire, hands busy with small tasks or quietly playing with simple toys, while mothers arranged bedding and checked blankets, smoothing straw mattresses and ensuring hides were tucked securely against the chill. Fathers attended to the final tasks outdoors, guiding animals back to the enclosure, inspecting fences one last time, and gathering any remaining firewood. Each movement was deliberate, shaped by the understanding that evening marked both completion and preparation, a delicate balance between reflection and readiness for night. Meals were shared beside the warming fire, modest yet nourishing. Bread, porridge, preserved meat, and milk offered both sustenance and a moment of communal pause. Conversations were subdued, voices gentle, and laughter softened, echoing faintly against the wooden walls. Stories passed from parent to child, recounting the day's events or sharing advice for the nights ahead. In these moments, the cabin held more than physical protection. It became a center of emotional sustenance, offering reassurance and comfort against the encroaching darkness beyond the logs. Outside, shadows deepened as the sun fully set, and the forest's nocturnal inhabitants became more active. The faint call of owls, rustle of small creatures, and whisper of wind through branches created a natural symphony, audible even within the cabin. Settlers were attuned to these sounds, recognizing both the beauty and potential dangers of the wilderness. Each rustle, each distant call, served as a reminder of the balance between safety inside the wooden walls and vigilance beyond them. As night approached, preparations for segmented sleep began. Children were tucked securely, blankets adjusted, and small hands held briefly before allowing the pull of first sleep to take them. Adults lingered by the fire, checking embers, whispering prayers, or reflecting on the day's successes and challenges. This interval between first and second sleep offered a unique space for quiet thought, for contemplation, and for attending to small but necessary tasks, reinforcing the enduring rhythm of life that had long guided early settlers. By the time darkness fully enveloped the clearing, the cabin had become a haven. Warmth from the hearth radiating gently, the scent of wood and smoke filling the air, and every occupant settled in preparation for the night. Sleep would come in its twofold rhythm, segmented yet restorative, ensuring that each person could rise once more with strength and readiness for the cycle of labor, rest, and renewal that defined existence among early American settlers. Night had fully settled across the clearing and the surrounding forest, casting the cabin in gentle shadows and filling the wilderness with the subtle, intricate sounds of nocturnal life. Within, the settlers had surrendered once more to the familiar rhythm of first sleep, the delicate pull of rest bringing quiet to bodies weary from the day's labor. Children curled into the straw-stuffed beds, the warmth of blankets and the presence of family providing comfort as dreams carried them into the calm world between wakefulness and slumber. After a few hours, a quiet interval emerged, the second phase of segmented sleep. Parents rose silently, stretching tired muscles and moving with deliberate care to avoid disturbing the still sleeping children. The hearth was attended, logs adjusted to maintain a steady glow, and embers coaxed to life where needed. Some quietly prepared small amounts of food for the following morning, while others inspected the cabin, listening for subtle noises that might hint at danger outside, or simply ensuring that the household remained secure. Every movement was measured, each step mindful of the fragile rhythm that the night demanded. The sounds of the forest outside filled the intervals of quiet activity. Owls called softly, their distant hoots echoing through the trees. Small creatures rustled among leaves and fallen branches, and the wind whispered through the pines, brushing against the wooden walls with faint, reassuring pressure. Inside, these sounds were familiar companions, not threats, providing a natural soundtrack to the settlers' nocturnal vigilance. The rhythm of segmented sleep had trained them to move in harmony with these nocturnal cues, blending observation, care, and rest into a seamless pattern. Parents whispered softly, offering prayers, quiet instructions, or small reassurances to children who occasionally stirred. Blankets were straightened, small hands held, and gentle breaths monitored to ensure comfort. The balance between vigilance and rest defined these hours, requiring focus yet yielding moments of reflection. A quiet time for thought and planning, while the world outside remained cloaked in darkness. Even in the stillness, the settlers' connection to the land, the cabin, and each other remained evident, shaping actions with awareness and care. As the night deepened further, the interval of wakefulness gave way again to the pull of second sleep. The cabin returned to a hush, punctuated only by the faint crackle of embers and the even breathing of sleepers. Children drifted back into dreams seamlessly. Adults followed soon after, and the cycle of night carried on undisturbed. Within these wooden walls, segmented sleep reinforced the settlers' endurance, offering both renewal and quiet contemplation, ensuring that when dawn arrived, each person would awaken with strength and readiness to continue the labor, care, and rhythm that defined life among early American settlers. The first light of morning slowly crept across the forest floor, filtering through the gaps in the wooden cabin walls and casting thin beams upon the straw-strewn floors. Birds called softly, their songs tentative yet persistent, as if testing the stillness of the waking world. The wind carried a coolness that hinted at the passing night, brushing through leaves and rustling the edges of blankets tucked around sleeping children. Within the cabin, the settlers stirred gradually, muscles stretching, bodies readjusting after the long interval of segmented sleep. Eyes still heavy but alert enough to begin the day's labor. Parents rose carefully, moving with measured steps to avoid disturbing the children still nestled in blankets. Hands stoked the fire, coaxing embers into warmth, while small vessels of water were set to heat. The familiar scents of smoke, wood, and straw filled the cabin, blending with the fresh morning air drifting through cracks and openings. Children, still half dreaming, were guided gently to tasks appropriate for their size and skill, stretching limbs and yawning softly as they learned the rhythm of work interwoven with rest. Breakfast was prepared over the fire, simple yet sustaining. Porridge thickened with water or milk, bread warmed beside glowing embers, and occasionally berries or preserved fruits gathered from the previous day. Families ate quietly, voices low, reflecting the gentle transition from night to day, from rest to labor. Even in these mundane moments, the settlers carried the imprint of segmented sleep, aware of energy conserved, of muscles renewed, and of the balance between effort and endurance that each day demanded. By mid-morning, the cabin emptied, as settlers returned to fields, animal pens, and gardens. Men repaired fences, guided livestock to grazing areas, and maintained tools, while women fetched water, tended small gardens, and prepared meals for the coming hours. Children assisted where they could, gathering kindling, carrying water, or observing older members to learn the patterns of work and responsibility that structured daily life. Every movement and decision was guided by awareness, a combination of experience, observation, and the subtle reminders from the body that rest had been taken, energy replenished, and focus restored. The sun climbed higher, and shadows shifted across the clearing, warming the cabin and surrounding areas. Yet, even in the brightness, the memory of night remained. Soft conversations, quiet attentions, and moments of calm imbued the work with a rhythm that balanced effort with ease. Settlers understood that the endurance of the day was not merely physical, but also mental and emotional, strengthened by the repeated cycles of sleep, reflection, and activity. This pattern ensured that each person, young or old, could carry on through the demanding hours, returning once more to the safety and comfort of the cabin when evening arrived, ready to repeat the enduring rhythm that defined life among early American settlers. As the sun climbed higher and the warmth of midday spread across the clearing, the settlers moved with a steady rhythm that had been cultivated over years of life in the wilderness. Every step and gesture was deliberate, shaped by the knowledge that labor must be balanced with observation, endurance, and careful attention to the needs of both family and livestock. Men repaired fences, guided animals, and checked tools for wear, while women carried water, tended small gardens, and prepared meals that would sustain the household. Children, too, engaged in chores suited to their size, gathering kindling, fetching water, or learning the ways of the forest under watchful eyes. Despite the activity, the rhythm of life was deeply influenced by the night's segmented sleep. Limbs moved with a calm efficiency. Eyes maintained steady focus, and decisions were informed by the subtle reminders of rest taken hours before. The settlers understood that energy was finite, that each task required care and attention, and that mistakes could be costly in both time and safety. Even brief pauses, stretching tired muscles, folding hands, or closing eyes for a heartbeat, were part of the pattern that ensured endurance across long hours of labor. Small moments of reflection punctuated the day's work. Parents whispered softly while tending animals, offering guidance or recounting lessons from previous seasons. Children learned patience, observation, and responsibility through careful repetition and encouragement. The cabin remained at the center of this rhythm, even when empty, its walls radiating the warmth of morning and night, of fires tended and blankets prepared, shaping the mental landscape of everyone who lived within its shelter. By mid-afternoon, the forest seemed to hum with life. Birds called in intermittent bursts. Animals moved cautiously through brush and trees, and the wind whispered across leaves and branches. Settlers moved in harmony with these subtle signals, recognizing the balance between activity and observation, between effort and attentiveness. Tools were sharpened, fences repaired, and small adjustments made to shelters or animal pens, all guided by careful practice and experience. Each action reinforced the cycle of labor, rest, and preparation, a pattern both practical and sustaining. As the day approached its later hours, the settlers prepared for the transition from work to evening. Meals were planned, fires prepared, and children guided back toward the cabin for small tasks and tidying of bedding. The forest beyond grew quieter. Shadows lengthened, and the warmth of the sun softened. Within the wooden walls of the cabin, a sense of calm settled once more, signaling that labor's end was near and that the comforting rhythm of evening, night, and segmented sleep would soon return, sustaining the unbroken pattern that defined life among early American settlers. As the sun began its slow descent, casting long, golden shadows across the clearing, the settlers gradually returned to the cabin, carrying with them the final remnants of the day's labor. The forest took on a softened hue, trees darkening against the fading light. and the gentle rustle of leaves sounded more pronounced as evening creatures began their stirrings. Inside, the cabin exuded a sense of calm. Warmth from the hearth and the smell of smoldering wood filled the air, inviting weary bodies into its comforting embrace. Parents tended to the final preparations for night. Blankets were straightened, straw mattresses fluffed, and fires adjusted to maintain gentle warmth through the coming hours. Children gathered around, performing small chores or quietly playing, their movements measured, guided by both instruction and habit. The rhythm of evening was familiar, a bridge between the demanding energy of day and the reflective calm of night. Every gesture, every small act, contributed to the overall balance of household care, preparing each individual for the segmented sleep that awaited. Meals were taken beside the fire, simple yet sufficient. Bread, porridge, and milk provided sustenance, while small portions of preserved meats or fruits added flavor and nourishment. Conversation was subdued, voices low, reflections shared on the day's accomplishments, challenges, and observations of the surrounding wilderness. The children listened attentively, absorbing lessons that extended beyond chores. Patience, responsibility, and respect for the rhythms of life that defined their family and their community. Outside, the forest was alive with subtle motion. Small creatures rustled through underbrush, owls called softly, and the whisper of wind through branches carried across the clearing. The settlers, attuned to these natural signals, moved with deliberate care, ensuring that all animals were secure, tools properly stored, and the cabin ready to provide protection. The delicate balance between vigilance and relaxation was maintained, a practice ingrained over years of life in the wilderness, shaping both body and mind for the approaching night. As darkness fully enveloped the surroundings, the household began the first stage of sleep. Children were tucked under blankets. Parents lingered briefly by the fire, whispering soft words, adjusting embers, and reflecting on the day. The pull of rest was steady, bodies sinking into straw mattresses, minds relaxing in the quiet companionship of family and home. The forest outside, though alive, was at a safe distance, the wooden walls shielding all within from both chill and uncertainty. Within the cabin, segmented sleep commenced once more, offering restorative hours and moments of quiet observation, ensuring that when dawn returned, each settler would awaken ready to continue the enduring cycle that had defined life among early American settlers. Night deepened fully across the clearing and the surrounding forest, blanketing the cabin in darkness, while the subtle sounds of nocturnal life filled the air. Within the wooden walls, the settlers had mostly surrendered to sleep, their breathing even and steady, muscles relaxed from the day's labor. Yet, after a few hours, the quiet interval of segmented sleep emerged, a time when parents rose carefully, moving with practiced deliberation to ensure that neither the children nor the household were disturbed. The hearth was tended, embers adjusted, and small tasks accomplished in soft whispers and gentle motions. During these hours, the cabin held a delicate balance of vigilance and rest. Parents checked on sleeping children, ensuring blankets were secure and that warmth persisted against the cool night air. Tools were inspected quietly, embers fanned into gentle glow, and food prepared for the early hours of the following morning. Every movement was deliberate, guided by the awareness that even in darkness, small oversights could ripple through the household, creating inconvenience or fatigue at dawn. The rhythm of segmented sleep allowed both restoration and care, providing a quiet space for attention and reflection amid the night. Outside, the forest was alive with subtle activity. Owls called from high branches. Small creatures rustled through leaves and underbrush, and the wind whispered across trees and brush. These sounds were familiar, not alarming, offering guidance and reassurance to those within the cabin. Settlers had learned to recognize the distinctions between natural nocturnal noise and signs of danger, moving with both awareness and ease. Even brief moments of pause, listening, observing, adjusting, were part of a practiced rhythm that had long guided life in the wilderness. Parents whispered softly, offering prayers, gentle instructions, or quiet reflections as they moved through the cabin. Children occasionally stirred, seeking comfort or warmth, their needs met promptly and silently. The subtle flow of energy and attention maintained both security and rest, a testament to generations of practice in balancing labor, vigilance, and sleep. Each member of the household understood the importance of these hours. Though brief and subdued, they reinforced endurance, focus, and the capacity to greet the new day with strength. As the interval of wakefulness gave way once more to second sleep, the cabin fell into quiet harmony. Embers glowed faintly, shadows shifted gently across walls and floor, and breathing returned to even cadence. Children drifted seamlessly into dreams. Parents followed soon after, and the cycle of night continued unbroken. Within these small wooden walls, the rhythm of segmented sleep, vigilance, and familial care intertwined, offering both restoration and reflection, sustaining life through the wilderness, and preparing all for another day of labor, observation, and the enduring patterns that defined existence among early American settlers. The first rays of sunlight pierced through the wooden slats of the cabin, casting thin, golden lines across the straw-strewn floors and illuminating traces of the previous night's fire. Birds called in soft, melodic bursts, announcing the arrival of a new day, while the wind carried a cool freshness from the surrounding forest. Within the cabin, the settlers stirred gradually, muscles stretching after the interval of second sleep, eyes blinking against the soft morning light, and bodies adjusting to the rhythm that segmented slumber had imparted. Parents rose carefully, moving with deliberate caution to avoid disturbing children who still clung to the comfort of blankets. Hands stoked embers to life, bringing warmth to the hearth and inviting the cabin into wakefulness. Water was drawn from containers, small vessels set to heat, and simple meals prepared for nourishment. Children, their eyes heavy but attentive, were gently guided into morning tasks, stretching limbs and learning the delicate rhythm of activity, balanced with reflection and observation. Breakfast was taken beside the fire, modest yet sufficient to sustain energy. Porridge thickened with water or milk, bread warmed by embers, and sometimes small preserved fruits or berries added to the meal. Conversation was subdued, voices gentle and reflective, sharing observations from dreams or the previous night's work. Even in these ordinary moments, the settlers carried awareness of energy management, understanding that endurance through the day depended on conserving strength and moving deliberately. By mid-morning, the cabin emptied as each member returned to tasks outdoors. Men guided livestock, repaired fences, and maintained tools, while women tended gardens, carried water, and prepared ingredients for later meals. Children assisted in manageable chores, collecting firewood, observing older settlers, or helping with animals. Every movement reflected knowledge gained from segmented sleep. Balance between effort and attention, vigilance, and the quiet wisdom of observing surroundings while conserving energy for sustained labor. The sun rose higher, shadows shifting across fields and forest edges, and warmth filled the clearing. Even amidst the busyness, the mental traces of night remained. calm attention, measured gestures, and subtle pauses ensured efficiency and safety. Each action contributed to the household's rhythm, reinforcing the cycle of labor, observation, and rest that defined life among early American settlers. As the day unfolded, the memory of rest carried from the night before informed every task, sustaining energy, strengthening resolve, and shaping the continuity of work, care, and familial connection that made life in wooden cabins both demanding and enduring. As the sun climbed to its zenith, casting warmth and bright light across the clearing, the settlers moved with a rhythm refined over years of life within the wilderness. Every gesture carried intention, from bending to lift bundles of hay to carefully tending livestock. Men repaired fences, maintained tools, and guided animals, while women carried water, prepared meals, and tended gardens, ensuring that every aspect of domestic life functioned smoothly. Children assisted where they could, gathering kindling, fetching water, or observing and learning from older family members, their movements a blend of instruction and natural curiosity. Even amidst the busyness, the awareness of energy conservation remained central. Limbs moved with calm efficiency. Eyes remained focused, and decisions reflected both experience and the subtle influence of the previous night's segmented sleep. Periodic pauses, stretching, adjusting loads, or observing surroundings ensured that work could continue steadily without unnecessary fatigue. The rhythm of daily labor was both physical and mental, an interplay of careful planning, observation, and endurance that shaped the household and the well-being of each member. Small moments of reflection and instruction were interwoven with practical tasks. Parents whispered guidance to children, sharing knowledge of plants, animals, and the signs of approaching weather. Children practiced patience, attention, and responsibility, gradually internalizing the routines and rhythms that defined life in the wooden cabins. Tasks were completed not in haste, but with deliberation, each gesture reinforcing the pattern of sustained labor, quiet observation, and preparedness for the evening and night that would inevitably return. The clearing and surrounding forest responded to the intensity of midday. Birds flitted actively between trees, animals sought shelter in underbrush, and the wind carried warmth and motion across the landscape. Settlers moved in harmony with these natural signals, adjusting their pace, attending to tasks, and maintaining vigilance. Tools were sharpened, fences inspected, and animals cared for with consistent attention. Even seemingly small actions, straightening a fence post, adjusting a bucket, or checking on a calf, were integral to the household's functioning, reflecting the careful attention required for survival and continuity. As afternoon waned and shadows lengthened, the settlers began to prepare for the transition from labor to evening. Meals were readied, fires attended, and children gradually guided back toward the cabin for smaller chores and tidying of bedding. The forest's sounds softened with the approach of dusk, and the wooden walls of the cabin promised warmth, shelter, and the restorative rhythm of evening and segmented sleep. Every action, observation, and movement carried the quiet, enduring logic that had defined life among early American settlers, a continuity sustained through care, labor, and the intimate understanding of the natural world surrounding their wooden homes. As the sun sank lower behind the trees, casting elongated shadows across the clearing, the settlers gradually returned to their cabin, carrying with them the last remnants of the day's work. The forest softened into muted hues of green and brown, the rustle of leaves and distant calls of birds signaling the approach of evening. Inside, the cabin exuded a quiet warmth, The soft scent of embers and wood filled the air, inviting weary bodies to rest and prepare for the night ahead. Parents tended to evening routines with practiced care. Blankets were straightened, straw mattresses fluffed, and fires adjusted to provide steady warmth throughout the approaching hours. Children, their small tasks complete, gathered near the hearth, playing quietly or helping with minor preparations, their movements gentle and measured. The rhythm of evening was familiar and reassuring, bridging the demanding labor of the day with the restorative calm of segmented sleep that would follow. Meals were shared by the fire, modest yet nourishing. Porridge, bread, milk, and occasionally preserved fruits or small portions of meat. Conversation was soft, voices low, reflecting on the day's work, sharing observations, or offering gentle guidance. The children listened attentively, absorbing not just the lessons of chores, but also the knowledge of patience, vigilance, and the unspoken understanding of balance between activity and rest. These moments reinforced family cohesion, providing a sense of security and continuity within the wooden walls. Outside, the forest responded to the fading light. Small creatures moved quietly among the underbrush. Owls called softly from high branches, and the wind whispered through leaves, creating a natural, nocturnal rhythm. Settlers, attuned to these subtle cues, ensured all livestock were secure, tools were stored, and the cabin was prepared for the night. The delicate interplay between vigilance and relaxation characterized these hours, a practice honed over years to maintain both safety and calm. As darkness fully enveloped the clearing, the family settled into the first stage of segmented sleep. Children were tucked under blankets. Parents lingered near the fire to adjust embers, whisper prayers, or quietly reflect on the day's events. The cabin became a haven, sheltering each member from the chill and uncertainty outside, while simultaneously fostering the restorative cycle that allowed bodies and minds to recover. In this rhythm, the patterns of vigilance, care, and rest intertwined, sustaining the household and preparing all for the next day's labor and observation, ensuring life continued in harmony within the wooden cabins that had become both shelter and home. Night had fully settled across the clearing, the forest, and the surrounding fields, leaving the cabin bathed in darkness except for the soft glow of the hearth embers. The interval of segmented sleep brought quiet activity within the walls. Parents rose slowly, moving with care so as not to disturb the children, attending to small yet essential tasks. Fires were tended, embers stirred to maintain gentle warmth, and simple chores were completed with whispered efficiency, each movement deliberate, precise, and mindful of the balance between vigilance and rest. The forest outside was alive with subtle nocturnal life. Owls called softly from high branches, small creatures rustled among fallen leaves, and the wind whispered through trees. These sounds, familiar and measured, guided the settlers' movements, helping them navigate both the practical needs of the household and the latent awareness that defined life at the edge of wilderness. Every step was calculated, each task executed with a quiet focus born from years of practice and the intimate understanding of the surrounding environment. Parents moved from one chore to another, occasionally checking on children to ensure warmth, safety, and comfort. Blankets were adjusted, small hands held, and gentle reassurances whispered. Tasks were varied yet seamless. Food prepared for the morning, tools inspected for wear, and livestock monitored, all performed in the hush of night. This nocturnal rhythm reinforced endurance, attentiveness, and the subtle art of balancing labor, observation, and restorative rest. Even in silence, the cabin resonated with care, attention, and quiet diligence, reflecting a household finely tuned to the cycles of life within the wilderness. The interval of wakefulness gradually gave way to second sleep, a return to stillness and calm. Children slipped back into dreams effortlessly. Adults followed shortly after, and the cabin once again settled into harmonious quiet. Embers glowed faintly. Shadows danced gently across walls and floors, and the breathing of sleepers blended with the faint sounds of nocturnal life outside. These hours, both restorative and reflective, allowed bodies to recover, minds to regain focus, and the household to maintain continuity across day and night. By the time the night reached its deepest phase, the wooden cabin stood as both shield and sanctuary, its walls sheltering all within from the chill, sounds, and uncertainties beyond. Segmented sleep, vigilance, and quiet attentiveness intertwined seamlessly, sustaining life through the wilderness and ensuring that when dawn arrived, the settlers would awaken prepared to resume the enduring cycle of labor, care, observation, and rest that had long defined existence within these simple yet resilient homes. The first light of dawn crept softly across the clearing, illuminating the wooden walls of the cabin with a gentle golden glow. Shadows of trees stretched long across the floor, and the subtle chorus of birdsong heralded the arrival of a new day. Inside, the settlers began to stir, muscles stretching after the interval of second sleep, eyes blinking against the soft morning light, and bodies adjusting to the familiar rhythm that segmented slumber had instilled. Parents rose carefully, moving deliberately to avoid disturbing children still nestled in blankets. Hands coaxed embers to life in the hearth, providing warmth to the cabin and signaling the start of daily routines. Water was drawn and set to heat, small meals prepared, and children gently guided into tasks appropriate to their age and strength. The rhythm of morning, shaped by the restorative sleep of the night, brought both energy and calm, ensuring that all were prepared for the demands of the day ahead. Breakfast was taken by the fire, modest yet sufficient. Porridge thickened with water or milk, bread warmed beside glowing embers, and sometimes preserved fruits or berries added flavor. Conversation was soft, reflective, recounting dreams or quietly discussing the day's plans. Even in these ordinary moments, the settlers were guided by awareness of energy, balancing nourishment with conservation, ensuring that bodies remained strong and minds alert for work, observation, and care throughout the day. By mid-morning, the cabin emptied once more, each member returning to outdoor tasks. Men guided livestock, repaired fences, and maintained tools. Women tended gardens, carried water, and prepared ingredients for meals later in the day. Children assisted where they could, collecting firewood, observing older family members, or helping with small chores. Each movement and decision reflected experience, observation, and the subtle influence of the previous night's segmented sleep, ensuring efficiency and vigilance without unnecessary fatigue. The sun climbed higher, warming the clearing and forest edges, while shadows shifted slowly across fields and pathways. Even amidst busyness, the quiet traces of night remained. Calm attention, measured gestures, and subtle pauses reinforced endurance and focus. Each task, small or large, contributed to the household's rhythm, maintaining the continuous cycle of labor, observation, and rest that had long defined life within these simple yet resilient homes. The memory of restorative sleep guided each movement, sustaining strength and harmony, and preparing all for the transition into evening, when the comforting patterns of hearth, care, and vigilance would once again return. As darkness fully enveloped the clearing, the family entered the first stage of segmented sleep. Children were tucked under blankets. Parents lingered by the fire briefly to adjust embers or whisper gentle words, and the cabin settled into harmonious quiet. Periods of wakefulness emerged naturally, allowing quiet attention to tasks or reflection, followed by restful sleep that renewed body and mind. Through this cycle, the settlers preserved energy, maintained vigilance, and reinforced the patterns of life that had endured across generations. By midnight, the cabin stood serene and still, a sanctuary amid the forest. The rhythm of segmented sleep, quiet care, and familial connection intertwined, sustaining life and preparing all for the morning to come. Within these simple wooden walls, the endurance, vigilance, and harmony that had defined the existence of early American settlers reached its quiet, enduring culmination. And now, dear listener, it's time to drift yourself into sleep. Take a deep, slow breath. Feel it fill your chest and let it out gently. Another deep inhale and release, letting every muscle relax, every thought slow down. Imagine the warmth of a cozy cabin, the quiet of a safe forest, the gentle rhythm of rest surrounding you. With each calm breath, feel your body sink deeper into comfort, your mind lighten, your thoughts drift. Good night. Let your eyes close. Let the gentle cycle of rest carry you away. And if you enjoyed this journey through the lives of early American settlers, remember to like, subscribe, and share, so we can continue these peaceful journeys together. Sleep well, dream softly, and awaken refreshed when morning comes.